Hello everyone! Today I wanted to talk a little bit more about what tools I like to use to help me work on my cross-stitch projects, which include things like frames, stands, and what pens I like to use to grid my fabric. And then in the end, I'm also going to give you guys a quick progress update on my current project, which is this long dog sampler right here. But first, if you're new here, welcome. My name's Julie, and this channel is about sharing updates on all of my creative hobbies, which currently include cross-stitch, embroidery, and sewing. You can see the machine right back there. I also wanted to say a huge thank you to everyone who saw my last video and decided to stick around. I appreciate all of your kind comments and hope to answer some of y'all's questions in this video today. So my preferred method to hold my fabric while I'm stitching is using these scroll frames. And the brand I believe is called Patikil. I'll see if I could put a screenshot of the actual description. But I bought two frame sizes from them. The first is this shorter 21 inches long by 12 inches tall scroll frame, which I'm currently using to hold my modern folk embroidery. The second one I purchased was this larger 33 inches long by same 12 inches tall scroll frame. And what I really like about these scroll frames is that they're super easy to use. They come with these plastic clamps you sort of clip your fabric into, and you can just roll them up to increase the tension. One thing I did notice is that sometimes towards the middle, it does get a bit looser, but I find it doesn't bother me too much. And another downside to the scroll frame is that they're not very portable. So whenever I'm traveling, I'll take a smaller embroidery hoop or a Q-snap because I can pack that up easier in my bag. Now, as far as stands go, I do have a Lowery stand, which I purchased last March for my birthday. And I like it because it holds my project up at sort of this tilted angle, which is where I prefer to work. And it also makes it very easy to flip and access the back, which I also appreciate. But before I got this stand, I would just stitch by balancing my frame in between these two desks I've got here. And I would just stitch using that way, holding my project. And before I even got the scroll frame, I would just stitch in hand and sort of have my fabric supported against the desk. But after a while, I found having a ton of fabric was too cumbersome to manage, so I appreciate having the scroll frame and the Lowery stand to help me work. Now, another question I got asked in my last video was if I grid my fabric, and the answer to that is sometimes. I find with these full coverage pieces, I can sort of use my previous stitching as reference to where to place my next stitches. But for these larger sampler type patterns with a lot of white space, I don't trust myself to count accurately. So I choose to place a grid to help me place my stitches correctly. And for the actual pens I use, currently I'm using these Aini brand water erasable fabric marking pens. I like how they have a very fine tip, so it makes it easy to grid these higher count fabrics. But a problem I did notice with them is that they do tend to bleed quite a bit. So in order to get crisp grid lines, I have to draw the line very quickly before the ink has time to spread. Another warning I got about these water erasable pens is that they could stain the fabric if left on for too long, which for pandemic I'm not too concerned about because I find the pattern itself is so compelling. It draws your attention so much that even now I don't really notice the grid lines. So I won't be too upset if they do end up staining this fabric. But for my modern folk embroidery Fruits of Plenty, I'm curious to see how well the lines will wash out because it's been sitting for about 7 months now. So that's what I'm gonna do now, sort of an experiment. So here I am in my kitchen, just filling up this tub with some very hot tap water. And I'm letting my project sit for about 10 minutes before I go in and sort of agitate it with my hands to help encourage the lines to wash out. And there's actually two reasons why I'm washing this project. The first is to erase the grid lines, and the second is to try and soften the fabric because I found out of the box it was very stiff. The fibers were very tightly woven together and hard to work with. So I'm hoping by washing it, it'll soften up a bit. And here I am just laying it out to dry, and it looks like most of the grid lines have washed out pretty well, so I'm happy about that. But the true test, I believe, will be when I wash out the grid lines from pandemic because they will have been sitting for over a year by the time I finish. So yeah, this week, as far as progress goes, I thought it would be interesting to document a week of stitching by just taking these quick little time-lapse videos of my stitching sessions. And you can see at the beginning of this week, I was about halfway done through page 7. I had a bit of catch up to do because over December, I was busy working on Christmas gifts, which is okay because I love making gifts for others, but it also meant I was falling a bit behind of my goal, which was to stitch 1 page a month in pandemic. But I was able to do a lot of catch up this week. I stitched every single day, and I experimented with using different camera angles to see which ones I liked. I find the close-up view I like, but I see that my hand is a bit in the way. So I'm not sure. I'm going to try later this week to film it from my right side where my hand is not in the way as much. But yeah, you guys should let me know which camera view you prefer seeing. It's definitely a lot easier for me to film from the left side because it's out of my way because I'm right-handed. But yeah, in this clip right here, I'm putting in all of the backstitching details from page 7. And for that, I like to use just a single strand of thread where I loop start, and then to finish it off, I just turn my project around and tuck it into some of the previous stitches I have. And in this clip, I'm showing the before and after adding all of the backstitching details. And yeah, by the end of this week, I was able to start working my way into page 8. And I find it's easier for me to just sort of hold the 2 pattern pages, one on each side, and sort of work my way into page 8, rather than just finishing off page 7 and having that awkward page break. I find I just prefer to just work my way into the next page. And here's where I'm currently at. I've finished up most of page 7, and my goal for February is to finish up page 8. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.